I've grown my brand to over 10 million subscribers across all platforms. And in this video, I'm gonna break down by tier which of these platforms has the highest potential for making you money with my real up-to-date stats and where I'm investing for the next year. So let's start with TikTok. So if we're gonna analyze platforms based on how much money-making potential they have inside of them, then these are the stats that I care about. First is who. So who's on this platform? If there's a platform with tons of kids on it versus people who have gazillions of dollars, I'd rather be on the one with gazillions of dollars. How many of those people are on the platform is a function of how much market share that particular platform has captured of my ideal who. Next, we have what's my ability to grow on the platform. Some platforms are really easy to grow, some platforms are really hard to grow. The next one is the depth, because I don't want people to just recognize my face, although that is good, but I'd much rather have them have a good relationship with me where I can provide tons of value, which then increases the likelihood of them converting. And then finally, I'm gonna give you the results that I have. Now, underneath of depth, I'll also give you a little bit more intrinsic stats like average view duration, average percentage viewed, so you can look at your own stats and kind of have that as a benchmark. So let's start with who. I looked at Pew Research to see which percentage of platforms have $100,000 families or higher, and how many of them are on that platform. Want to know what it is for TikTok? It's 27%. All right, so 27% of families, so almost 3 out of 4 are not on TikTok who make over $100,000 a year. That was surprising to me, but when you hear some of the rest of the stats, it'll become less surprising. The next question is, how many do we have here? And so this is a function of market share within the United States, which on TikTok is 33%. Now we're like, okay, so we've got a lowish amount of people who make money. There's 33% market share across the US at least. Now let's talk about growth. Now, on TikTok, growth is one of the highest and best components of TikTok, as in it's one of the easiest ones to grow. But I will say that in recent history, it's become harder and harder to grow. And because of the way that they've changed the algorithm, what we've noticed is that shorts on one platform don't necessarily work on TikTok anymore. And so now it's platform specific. Something that works on Facebook Reels might not work on Instagram Reels, that might not work on YouTube Shorts, which might not work on TikTok. And so it's actually becoming more and more fragmented, which is why this video is so important. So you put your attention where it matters most. With all that being said, TikTok still ranks high among the platforms in terms of discoverability and your ability to grow from zero, meaning it favors newer creators. Now, it still may be hard, but it still favors people equally versus other platforms where they still skew towards larger creators. So when it comes to depth, our next marker, it's about how much time are they gonna actually spend per unit of content that we put out. So TikTok ranks really low here. So on the low side, you get something like 5 seconds to 20 seconds. At least these are the statistics that we have on the low to high side in terms of duration per view. Now, mind you, that's not a lot of time to provide a ton of value, especially if just someone's immediately scrolling. And if you absolutely murder it and you get 25 seconds from them, I think the main benefit you get is that they just recognize your face. I can almost tell whenever I get recognized in public when someone is a TikTok viewer, because they're like, you're that guy, I don't know your name, but yeah, I see you, right? Versus people on like YouTube are like, dude, you've changed my life. You've made me so much money. You're the best. I know your name. I bought your book. It's a completely different avatar in terms of the experience. So then we have conversion. Now, TikTok has two things that are kind of interesting that you might not know. So number one, Gen Z prefers Instagram DMs to TikTok DMs. And so in terms of your ability to convert people from TikTok, it actually tends to be significantly lower. Now, for very low ticket things like TikTok Shop are coming out and are having massive adoption, which is encouraging. But if you're selling any kind of services, which 78% of businesses are, this one's kind of tough. And so I'm gonna put this as low. And to be clear, TikTok a couple of years ago was amazing for new creators because it was the first one that had short videos, which is easier for someone to get into. It's much harder to make a 20-minute, high production, nice, valuable piece of content for YouTube versus a 15-second short that you can put on TikTok. But then the other platforms caught on, and you got YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, the Facebook Reels, and all the other platforms that have short. LinkedIn has shorts now. Like, they're all over the place. And so let's get to the results. And this is where it gets really crazy. And so I have almost 900,000 followers on TikTok at the point of this video. And the amount of traffic that I get from my TikTok, despite being about a tenth of my follower count, is only 2.5% of all of the traffic that goes to my page, which I tracked on our CRM. And so it basically has 1/4 the effectiveness per unit compared to the other platforms, which means that some other platforms are disproportionately making up the volume. And the whole reason I wanted to collect all this data for me was because there was a business owner who was a winner of the Skool games, so skool.com/games. And when he came out, he was like, yeah, it's really weird. I have 800,000 on TikTok and I have 200,000 on Instagram, but 90% of my revenue comes from Instagram. And I thought about that and I was like, wait a second. So think about this. The amount of time that he spends on TikTok, could he spend all of that time on Instagram and get 10% more to make up for all of it? And the answer is probably yes. And so that totally changed my perspective in terms of thinking, wait a second, we want to grow everywhere, but there's definitely some platforms where we get higher returns for our avatar, which is business owners. And so for you and your avatar, looking at the stats should give you where you should put your time so you can make the most money, especially if you're on a budget and you can't do 10 platforms, right? You can maybe just do 1 or 2. You should do the ones that make you the most. And by the way, if you want to check out one of our workshops, you can go to acquisition.com. We'd love to talk to you. It's for business owners only. So if you don't have a business, go to Skool.com and we can help you start one. With all this taken into consideration, what am I doing with my TikTok strategy? I am rating it an F. And it's something that I'm not putting a ton of time and attention into because there are other platforms that are making me way more per unit of time, money, and effort I'm putting in. And one more thing that my team just told me about TikTok real quick is that the average session length of someone going from TikTok to acquisition.com, my website, is 8 seconds. Now, you'll see some of the ones later are way higher. So the next platform is the Tubes, which if you're watching this on YouTube, then this is for you. So we're gonna cover the same metrics as before, and we're gonna start with who? What percentage of families over 100K are here? Survey says 89%. So take that in consideration versus TikTok, which was much, much lower than that. All right. People who have money are on YouTube. The next thing is what percentage of the United States is on here? 83%. All right. So you've got a huge percentage of the people who are making the most money on the platform. And so growth for this platform really comes down to how discoverable is your content on the platform. And to give you context, for me at least, 80% of my traffic comes from the suggested or browse features, meaning more than 3/4 of the people that come and watch my stuff, maybe you right now, actually weren't coming because you were a subscriber, but because the algorithm said you might like this video. And so for me, I rate this as high. Now, the next question is, okay, so we've got the right people, we can grow on this platform, these are all pluses. So the next thing is, well, how much time are these people actually spending with you so you can really provide value? Well, for us, our average view duration per video across all channels is over 8.5 minutes. All right, so it's 8.5 minutes. Now compare that to the 5 to 20 seconds that we're getting on TikTok. I mean, we're talking 20 times. I didn't do the math, but it's a lot. A lot more time is spent here versus others. And so this allows you to develop a more realistic, a deeper, realer relationship with your audience because you can actually give them value that they can do stuff with. If we want to do a quick apples to apples with TikTok, obviously YouTube has YouTube Shorts. So let me tell you something interesting about this. The average YouTube short that we have has a 33-second average view duration. Remember 5 to 20 on TikTok? We're more than twice that over here on YouTube. Now, how does this actually translate to what we care about, which is conversion? When we talk about the convertibility of YouTube, it's actually one of the lower ones, but there's a massive caveat here, which is that I can't DM you if you're a subscriber. There's no real story that I can post and immediately see it. The closest thing is the community tab that you can do, which by the way, murders. So if you do have a YouTube channel, highly recommend doing CTAs on the community tab sporadically when it makes sense. And so for here, I would rate this low to medium. The community tab kind of brings it up a little bit, but by and large, it's very hard for people to immediately convert. They basically have to click a link somewhere else. And if you put it in the video, it does kill your view duration. So it's like if you're going to say something, you just got to make it short, make sure that it's not too big of an ask from the audience. And then you can put links in the description, which by the way, if you look at our description, you can just look, you want to put it above the fold. So you want to have to be the first thing that somebody sees before they even click see more is where you want to drive them. You can also, pro tip, put the first comment that you have in the comment section, just pin that comment. So that gives you 2 different places, and third inside the video where you can drive traffic. This is just something that I've learned over time, but still, that's a lot of effort, and it's not like, hey, respond to my Instagram story, foreshadowing, and we can start a conversation immediately on the platform. And to give context on this little community post thing I was saying, my community posts over the last 30 days had 2.5 million impressions. And to put that in context, my short videos got about 18 million impressions. So it's not nothing. It is relatively significant, especially when you can load it with some sort of call to action in there. But no matter what, you pretty much have to take people off the platform in order to converse with them and potentially convert them. Now, let's talk about results, because all of this stuff is conjecture. Let's get to the brass tacks, which is, here's the crazy thing, drum roll, 28.6% of our traffic comes from YouTube. All right, so a massive amount. But there's another caveat that I want to put on top of this. Our YouTube traffic converts at 3 to 4 times every other platform. So when these clicks that go here are worth a ton. And so the actual percentage of the contacts that we create, people who want to become portfolio companies, business owners that want to scale and go to acquisition.com, almost 60% of those contacts actually come from YouTube originally. And remember that little 8-second average that TikTok gave us in terms of how long people even spend on the page? Want to guess what it is for YouTube? It's 91 seconds. It's 1.5 minutes. So we're talking 10x the amount of time that people are actually spending on page. All right, so you're taking somebody who has high intention, that you've delivered value to, they actually remember your name, and you can actually start a meaningful conversation to help them in a more deep way via commerce, selling stuff, whatever. So one of the things that actually got me on YouTube originally, one of the last pieces of content that I consumed before I was like, you know what, I'm gonna start creating, was I heard this guy who had a 20-something question application, and he was on a podcast and he said, I get about 3,000 applications a month. And I looked at his YouTube channel and he had like 300,000 subscribers. And I was like, holy cow. Because at this point, all I had done was paid ads. And so I was like, 3,000 inbound warm applications. I was like, my God, if I had that kind of volume, I'd be able to do so much with that. And so when I saw the 300,000 and I saw that that translated into 3,000 applications a month, I was like, there's something here and I'm gonna try and figure it out. And so if you are getting started, listen, I have a massive team, but it didn't start that way. So I had one guy who I stayed committed to posting 3 videos a week. And if you look at the very earliest videos on my channel, it's me with a webcam at my desk, just talking about business stuff as it came up throughout the day. And so I would encourage you to just start, and then all you have to do is every month or every week, look back at the 3 videos you made the week before and just try and improve one thing. And if you just stick that, what happens is you create this checklist over time that becomes this Mondo checklist of what ultimately creates an exceptional video that performs. I remember when I got so excited when we had my first 1,000 view video in 24 hours. And I was like, dude, can you believe, like there's gonna be a time where we're gonna get 10,000 views in a day. And now we do 100,000 views in our first day. And so the levels just keep going and going and going as you grow in skill. And if you're gonna obsess about something, these are the 2 things I would obsess on. Number 1 is the thumbnail. One of my last 2 videos was no BS advice on how to get rich in 10 years. And we split test 9 different thumbnails. And so thing 1 is the thumbnail matters a lot. Thing 2 is the first 8 seconds of your video, you wanna be done talking about what the video is gonna be about and start. And this is something that when I see a beginner video, I watch and it's like 2 minutes before they actually start the video. You've already lost everyone. And so you're gonna lose most people in the first 30 seconds. And so you wanna crush the intro so they know it's exactly what you promised in the thumbnail headline, and then you get to the meat as fast as possible. And this video right here, we did 8 different takes of the intro where I slowly worked from 30 seconds down to 8, and then that's what became the intro that you saw before seeing this moment right now. With all that being said, the YouTube gets the highest praise in the internet ecosystem, Jesus, and gets the S tier ranking because this is where I'm doubling down and continuing to pour more and more resources because this is where I'm getting the best returns. Next up, we have the artist formerly known as Twitter, currently known as the X Factor. First up, we've got who's on this platform. So X has 29% of people over $100,000 in household income are on X. So about the same as TikTok, actually a little bit higher. The next question is how many of these people, right? What percentage of the population of the United States is on X? And so here, this is where it's a little bit lower. So TikTok's got them, they're at 33 versus 22 on X. Now let's talk about growth. Growth for X, it's one of the most viral platforms because the share button is the easiest button on X and Twitter. And this is fundamentally what allowed people to organically grow on Twitter to begin with. But it is a platform that you have to be really, really good at words, and it takes a very long time to do that. But the advantage is that you can actually tweet a sentence or a word or an image or a meme. And so there's a lot of things that are native to the platform, and Elon continues to put more and more stuff on there to make it more and more viral and just continue to improve it overall. And after being stagnant for years, Twitter is actually back on a growth curve right now. But here's an interesting tidbit for X users. It's a little bit more of a silo, but the people who are on X tend to be really hardcore. And so the average X user spends 34 minutes per day on the platform, which is about half of some of the other platforms, but still not bad at all comparatively. The next one's real quick. Depth. We don't have stats because there's no real average view duration for Twitter. But the easiest thing that I look at for this is how many comments, how engaged people are. I don't have particular stats on it, but with that being said, let's move on to conversion, which is what matters. Now, Twitter is interesting. There's lots of people that have 1,000 person followings, 8,000 person followings, and make multiple millions of dollars a year on Twitter because they're super niche down in terms of the types of topics they talk about. In fact, there was a business that came here the other day who is a CRO marketing agency that specialized in e-commerce companies doing over $10 million a year. So talk about like a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche. And he was doing $5 million a year from his 8,000 person Twitter following. And all he did was have in-depth threads where he would just say, here's a split test that one, here's another split test that one. And the entire thing of his bio was, if you want to call, click my calendar link and book a call. And he told me that he was getting 8 to 12 calls a day with unbelievably qualified prospects. And so one, you have to go off platform, but you have this link that's right there and immediately visible. The second thing on Twitter is you can DM. And so many people DM on Twitter all the time. And so people who are on that platform are very accustomed to it. And the amount of access that you get on Twitter/X is kind of unbelievable. Like you've got superstars on there who will reply to DMs. It's nuts. First thing you don't want to do if you're just DMing people on Twitter is just DM them with an ask. The amount of people that have is like, hey, can we hop on a call? No, no, we can't. Thanks for the ask though. I think compliments are a great way to start, like, hey, I love this thread. Don't just say, hey, I love your stuff. Point to a specific thread that you liked and then explain why. And if someone says thank you, then you can respond afterwards. If someone doesn't say thank you to a compliment, then they're probably not going to engage anyways. And so I would just start with some, like, what is valuable to somebody is just telling them they did a good job. So I rate this a high on the convertibility of the audience. Now, what does that actually translate into us for results? So before I give you the stats on this, I want to give you a little bit of context. The reason I like X so much is that X is actually my hub for content. So what I mean is I consume X more than any other platform personally, and I, on the fly, create on X. So 100% of the tweets that are on X are me in the moment, just tweeting them out. I heard something on a meeting, someone said something, and I think of a pithy way to say it, and then I shoot it out, right? Now, the thing is that X generates a little bit of results, and I'll explain what it is in a moment. But what it does do is it actually feeds all the other platforms, because the captions on my Instagram are tweets from here. And the long form stuff that we put on LinkedIn are just multiple tweets put together and reformatted. And so if you ever see written word from Alex Hormozi on any platform, they are words that I wrote. I have no ghostwriters. I do have people who assemble the words that I have and then put them in a new order or group them together. But that's how I've been able to scale my voice without ever being like, oh, that's really cringe. So your ability to repurpose all the stuff you put on X is super high. Our percentage of traffic that we get to our site is 6.12%. And if you look at how many people I have on Twitter, it's about 6% of my total subscribers. And so it's about 1-to-1 in terms of the ratio. Like, it's pulling its weight in terms of conversion. Even though this is a short form platform, compared to TikTok, the average session duration on my site from someone from X is still 4 times higher than TikTok. So it's over 30 something seconds is what people do from X on my site. And for that reason, I give X an A rating for me. Because the main thing is I'm not gonna stop going on X. We don't really have a lot of team dedicated to X. It's pretty much just me, and my team takes what I put there and then sprays it everywhere else. And so this is, for me, incredibly valuable. Y'all thought I was gonna put it on S, I know. But no, this is an A tier for me. I mean, if I had to pick YouTube or X, I would do YouTube. But X is the wellspring of everything else that I make. Which leads us to the Inn of Linked, the LinkedIn magic, the professional network where all people are serious, but no one really is. And let's break down how much money this platform actually makes. And I think it will surprise you. And I have changed my view on LinkedIn. Who's on LinkedIn? Now, this one may surprise you. 53% of households over $100,000 are on LinkedIn. So this is double TikTok, like we were talking about earlier. Now, the next question is, how many people in the United States are on LinkedIn? And this one was kind of surprising to me. It was 30%. So I actually thought it'd be way lower than that because I figured no one uses LinkedIn. But it turns out a lot of people use LinkedIn, just not as much as you'd think in terms of per day. And so the average amount of time spent on LinkedIn per day for LinkedIn users is about 7 minutes. So way lower than a lot of the other platforms. So let's talk about growth. So growth for me and growth for you should probably be incredibly important, because if the point of advertising is to let people know about your stuff, you want platforms that let way more people than already know about you know about your stuff. And so I give LinkedIn a medium to high, and I'll explain why. So LinkedIn is super shareable and very connection driven. And so the part that I would say is high about it is that there's a lot of people who share on LinkedIn. It's very common to share stuff. It's kind of like a sharing culture. And when you create high value stuff, people want the association with that value, and then they share public because it makes them look like they've got, they're thought leaders. Now, the flip side is the reason that I still have this medium anchor is that because it's connection driven. So think about it like a hinge. So if you have 10 people, a lot of your posts will get shown to people who are friends with your connections, right? So it's like so-and-so is friends with so-and-so who made this post, right? And so in the beginning, it can be harder for you to get started because you might have only a few connections. And so let me give you a tip on this. Right now, wherever you went to high school, wherever you went to college, if you went to college, wherever you work, all of these places are very customary to have LinkedIn profiles. And by the way, I would strongly encourage you to at least put one up there that looks like you exist, because from a professional setting, I'll tell you some of the big benefits that I get that are not on this list that have been worth it for me. But you can get your first 500 connections. And the nice thing with LinkedIn is they just say 500 plus. So it's not like you have to think like, oh my God, I need millions and millions of people. Like, you max out your personal connections at 500. So you could do that with a high school class. Like, it's not hard to get going. So let's talk about depth real quick, because there's no average view duration. We have no real stats on that. So let's get on to the drum roll of conversion. Now, LinkedIn, so think about like, TikTok is like a bomb or like a sprinkler, right? LinkedIn is like you've got a hose with a laser pointer on it, and you can shoot whoever you want with it, all right? And so the conversion ability on LinkedIn is extremely high. All right, and I'm gonna talk about this in a couple different vectors. So number one is it's very high because there's a ton of sophisticated tools. LinkedIn is built for outbound, meaning you can get incredibly targeted with your searchability criteria for prospects. And so if you want to find hedge fund managers who are in this state and above this age, you can do that. And so LinkedIn has something called Sales Navigator that you can use. 40% of B2B marketers say that this is their primary channel for getting customers. So do not sleep on the ability. Now, mind you, LinkedIn ads, shaky, some people make them work. LinkedIn content overall will help you convert when you do DMs, but this is an outbound monster. All right, and relative to the following count that you have on LinkedIn, your ability to make money is probably the highest. So you can have the tiniest following and make the most money on LinkedIn because of how targeted you can be with your outreach and how easy it is to message someone who engages with your content. And before I move on to results, I want to give you a little hack here for the growth. One of the biggest growth methods right now on LinkedIn is getting large accounts to comment on your stuff. And so if a large account comments on your thing, it gets shown to all of their following. And so it's a massive leverage point. Like think about a comment almost as a collab. And so you want to do whatever you can to attract those bigger accounts. And I'll tell you an easy hack for this. Write about them. Talk about how great this person is or how great a particular piece of content they made is. Like actually write something significant. And you have a high likelihood that they will say like, hey, thanks, or this was awesome. And the longer their response is, the more engagement draws to you. Like there was a guy that made a comment, made a post the other day, and I commented on it. And he had a small-ish following. And that post got, I think, like 50 times his average in terms of likes and comments after that, because I have a large following on LinkedIn. And so he got to leverage basically the entirety of my audience by just making a piece of content that I found relevant. So drum roll for the results, and this will surprise you. Over 9% plus of my traffic to my site comes from LinkedIn. And the average session duration of these people is over 40 seconds. All right, so it's higher than every other platform besides YouTube. All right, so really strong intent from these people. Now, let me give you the 1,000 IQ move that is the reason that I like LinkedIn a lot. So for me, we have a portfolio of companies at acquisition.com. Right now, it's just under 10 companies that do over $250 million a year in revenue. And so we constantly are recruiting high-level talent for our portfolio companies and for our holding company at acquisition. And so the biggest unspoken ROI that I get from LinkedIn and that Layla gets from LinkedIn is that our DMs are about recruiting. So we can go directly headhunt some of the best people in the world. And because we have followings, because they can look at the stuff we put out there, the response rates that we get are higher than any other platform for talent. And so if you want to get really amazing people, LinkedIn is going to be the big lever that you can use to grow your business by just getting the smartest people on your team. So with all that being said, we've got a lot of people with money. We've got decent growth. We've got high conversion ability, high intent. And just to give you context on this 9%, it's about twice its weight based on the percentage of followers that I have on LinkedIn. So we get way more per follower than like TikTok, where I get 1/4 the amount of followers that actually translate into results. So where does LinkedIn go? Survey says, boom, B tier. And the main reason here is that I don't think that it can generate as much, at least for me, but it is like, I would put it like almost between the two, but in terms of where I'm putting my actual resources, we use a lot of my X content on LinkedIn and it's worked exceptionally well. And so we're probably like, I'm basically continuing to invest the same amount that I have been investing in LinkedIn. Next up, we've got the Gram, the myth, the legend, Instagram itself, champion of children, father to the fatherless, and moneymaker to people who shake their booties. So that being said, I'm a B2B guy. I serve as business owner. So how does Instagram measure up for me? Again, the results may surprise you like they did for me. So number one, what percentage of people over 100K are on here? 54%. All right, so a really monster percentage. The second highest that we've had so far across all platforms, only second to YouTube. Next, how many people in the United States are on Gram? All right, which is 47%. Again, the second highest that we've come to so far. So pretty promising up top. Now let's talk about growth. Growth, because of the advent of Reels, right now is high, all right? You can, if you are formatting your stuff correctly, get viral growth, and they're putting more and more to try and favor new creators. So if you look at a guy named Mosseri, he's the head of Instagram. I recommend following him, no association. He just has a lot of stuff like from the horse's mouth of what they're doing in the algorithm, what they want to favor. And I'll tell you a fun fact that he shared with me personally, not really, it was on his Instagram, is that a lot of people think that Instagram's favoring video. And he said, no, people favor video. And so that's what gets shared the most. It's not that we did anything to the algorithm. It's just people just prefer to engage in videos. And the big thing that they care about is shares. They want to see how many people take your video and then immediately send it to friends. And especially if you send it off platform. So if you copy the link and then text it, that's what gets more people to Instagram. That's the holy grail of what they want. For the bad news. So the depth on Instagram is lower. Now it's not as low as TikTok, but for us, it's 12 to 20%. 12 to 20 seconds. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of context on this number. So I personally tend to do a lot of tweet reels, and my tweet reels are like 3 seconds or 5 seconds long. So no one can even watch longer than that. And so that skews my data lower. And so if we wanted to take the time to like look at every single video that's not a tweet reel and then parse the data out, we could probably figure it out. But I'll bet you that it's significantly higher than this based on some of these down funnel metrics. So people see the tweet reels, they share them. That's how some of my growth comes. But a lot of the depth for me comes from alternating between these kind of higher top of funnel, if you will, tweet-based videos versus the kind of in-depth me talking to a business owner, me at a Q&A or whatever. This is something that we learned the hard way. So Instagram is unlike TikTok in terms of the fact that they penalize you for posting too much. And so we've tried 8 a day, 6 a day, 4 a day. And so we found our sweet spot at 2 sessions per day. So 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, and we kind of spread them out. Now, TikTok, for example, we post way more frequently. And as you see, I'm going to be divesting some of my attention there. But you don't get penalized, same as X. You don't get penalized for tweeting more. You don't get penalized for posting more TikToks at the moment. And so for us, we really spend more time curating the 1 to 2 things that we put out per day on here because they're the only shots we've got. So let's talk about your ability to convert your audience on Instagram. So this one, I would say, honestly, is probably only second to LinkedIn in terms of your convertibility. LinkedIn has other things that make it worse than Instagram, some of the other stats I shared, but in terms of your ability to convert on Instagram, it's so good. So the only thing you can't do is get laser targeted the way you can with Sales Navigator. But what you can do is you've got stories where you can do CTAs, you can do swipe ups, people can click links, you can link it with tools like ManyChat where if someone DMs you a certain word or comments a certain word, it begins the conversation with them. And so you can do all of your commerce directly on Instagram. They also have Instagram Shop. Like they have really, and they're continuing to invest in this to make this such a high converting platform. And the story that I told at the very beginning, a guy who had 800,000 on TikTok and 200,000 on Instagram was getting 90% of his revenue from Instagram. I was like, I need to make a video on this because I need to look at our data to see if we need to reallocate our own resources to make the most money. And so here's a really important point with conversion. A lot of people chase views. And so like if you go up to strangers on the street and slap them and run away, you're gonna get a ton of views because it's crazy viral stuff. But you're not gonna get the right types of views from the right who, unless you sell how to slap strangers in public and not get hit back, right? But unless that's what you sell, that's probably gonna be relevant content for you. And so if you're an educator, you're a business owner, which most of us are educators, not entertainers, then what you're going to want to make sure that you're making your content is about the stuff you sell and about the problems that your avatar or ideal avatar suffers from and how you can help solve them. All right, and so there's a nutritional dietitian who I met who had 5,800 followers on Instagram. She's doing $1 million a year, and with a couple tweaks that I walked through with her, I think she'll do 3 to 5 million just from 5,800 followers. And her content, here's the crazy part, the highest piece of content that I could find when I scrolled had 19 likes. But she was making 10 sales a day on average for her $39 to $99 thing. And then she would manually email every person who bought the thing and say, hey, want to buy my more expensive thing? And she was doing almost $100,000 a month just from that simple system. And you know what her really niche was? She talked about how to bill insurance companies more profitably. All of her content was like, hey, here's Aetna and how you can bill them way more than you currently are as a registered dietitian. So like a niche of a niche of a niche. And me personally, I look at a lot of gym equipment. It's something that I'm really interested in. I'm a hobbyist, if you want to call it that. And so a lot of metal fabricators, you might be surprised, are very terrible marketers. And so a lot of them have like 5 likes, 20 likes on their posts, but guess who sees them? Me, because that's what Instagram knows I love. If they put a new machine that I haven't seen, I'm clicking on it. And so I would encourage you, don't worry about the likes. Worry about who the likes are coming from. And one of the cool things with Instagram, because of all the different ways that you can convert on there, is that you can always be seen as giving and you can convert in private. And so you don't even need to make asks publicly. If you just say, hey, DM me this, or hey, I want to send you this thing, then you can start the conversation and you can do the commerce on the conversation rather than in public. So give in public, sell in private. And this enables you to do both. And this may be the stat that blows your mind the most. The amount of traffic that goes to my site from Instagram is 48%. 48% of my acquisition.com traffic comes from Instagram. Now, I'll give you a little caveat here because it'll be important, is that by absolute amounts, Instagram sends more traffic to acquisition.com than YouTube does. You're like, huh, well, that's interesting. Now, in terms of session length, remember this was 91? This one is 28 seconds in session length. So it is shorter. Now, mind you, a lot of the content here is shorter. So it kind of makes sense that people would follow their same kind of consumption pattern when they click over. And so here's the down fact about Instagram from this, is that when they go to my site, people on Instagram convert significantly less than the people on YouTube, but they convert about the same as the other platforms. TLDR, tons of traffic coming from Instagram, conversion about the same. And for that reason, I rank the gram in, let's see if I don't tear this damn page off. There we go. I rank this as an S tier. Is it as an S tier? Is that what the Gen Z kids say these days? It is an S tier. It's the top guy. It's very good. I put both of these as my 2 top dogs that we're investing the same or more resources going into the next year. Next up, we have the Book of Faces, the man, the myth himself, Smash Book original. This one is actually one that I've changed my mind on. And so before I dive into these stats, on Facebook, I had to restart my account. Because, and I'll tell you what I made as a mistake. So years and years ago, I was a new entrepreneur, and someone told me just go run ads in Thailand because you get clicks for like a penny and you can get followers for like 10 cents a piece. And so I ran ads to get my Facebook following to 70,000 so I looked legit. Now here's the problem with that, is that Facebook then serves content that I have, this is back in the day, to people who are the people who liked my page, unsurprisingly. And it turns out people who don't speak English and are just randomly selected from Thailand are not that interested in business content. And so it basically prevented me from growing my account when I actually wanted to go legit and make valuable content. This is years and years later, but I still have my original profile. And so we had to restart my Facebook profile just in this last year. And so for those of you who are like, man, he's got all these followers. I started at 0 this year. All right. So, and like, we were like, hey, we got 1,000 views on a video and we started all over again. So like, don't be afraid of that. It's just part of the game. Everyone starts at 0. So let's rock the stats real quick. So of people over 100K, how many of them on here? 68%. All right. So second only to ZTube. How many of people in America? Now this is a wild one. It's also 68% of America is on Facebook, now known as Meta. I thought both were Meta. I'm confused. You get the idea. Now, let's talk about growth, all right, because this is where it matters. All right, got it. We got a bunch of the people that we want on there. A lot of the United States is on there because it's an older platform. How about growth? Now, there was a moment for a few years where Facebook was very tough to grow on. So it was like organic on Facebook crushed, and then all of a sudden it stopped crushing, and they were like, you have to use our ads platform if you want to get any views. And basically Facebook organic like died. And then they resurrected it again when Reels came out and they started making Reels for Facebook. And so now growth on Facebook, I would say, is high again. All right. If you make stuff that's platform specific. Again, we have noticed that stuff that performs really well on Instagram doesn't necessarily perform well on Facebook. And stuff shorts on TikTok don't necessarily perform well here. So each platform is getting more and more, separated in terms of what performs well. So with this one, we weren't able to pull our average view per, but I would say that it's high because the average session length for us is 53 seconds on our site from people who come from Facebook, which means that of all the ones, so I'm going to spoil this one for you, of all the platforms, it is the second highest session length on our site, which has a higher translation over to contacts and downstream things like money. All right. Now, let's talk conversion. So the convertibility on Facebook, I would say, is high, not as high as Instagram, but high because a lot of the same features have been carried over. One is you've got Facebook stories and people can respond to your stories. You can DM on Facebook. It links with tools like ManyChat, where you can do automation on Facebook. And so you have a lot of different ways that you can convert people. And it's a platform where many people have profiles and get notifications when they get messages. So we will rate this as, I'm gonna say a high medium to high, like super high medium, extra medium, a schmedium if you will. And so let's talk about results because this is what matters most to everybody here, right? And so this one is also fascinating. So 3.8% of our traffic comes from Facebook. Now, I only have like 150,000 followers on Facebook. So for me, that's the smallest of all the accounts I'm gonna talk about today. But this is more than TikTok, which has almost 900,000. So my 150,000 followers on Facebook generate more than, almost double the amount that my TikTok does with 1/6 the amount of people who are actually following. So you look at the relative difference. It's 1.5 times more conversion on 1/6. So it's 9x the potency. So you catching on with this here? You're like, wait a second. You spent all this time here, and in just a few months here, you were able to get way more people to your site to ultimately convert later. Yeah. And so if you're like, should I start a TikTok or should I make more content on Facebook? Well, I'll let you use your second brain cell and figure that one out for yourself. And so one of the cool parts about Facebook is it's kind of like a hybrid between LinkedIn and Instagram, because you can do long form text posts and like very long thread-based stuff. You can do pictures and you can do video on there. And so it's a platform that's been really adaptable in terms of the amount of different types of content that you can create. And I see that as a big plus because Facebook's almost like whatever you want to make, they'll support you in making it, with the exception of maybe audio. And with that being said, I have now moved Facebook in my life. So before this, it was below F tier. We weren't even making content on Facebook at all. But when we started looking at these stats, I was like, yeah, this is actually an A tier for me. And that may be surprising for you, but this is where I'm putting more of my resources in the next year because of all the things that I said. And to be clear, before I made this video, it was lower. But when we looked at all the data, this is how I'm prioritizing my resources. And so if you're like, man, which one should I create on? This should inform you. Also, if you want the meta lesson here, look at your data. So I just do what the data tells me to do, which is, we have high growth here, we have high conversion, we have lots of people who have the money, who are on this platform. It's one of the oldest platforms. They now have more discoverability. And so yeah, I'm putting more time into it. And before I get into our double feature for this next one, I'm gonna do some honorable mentions at the end that I am putting some resources towards that I didn't want to put on this list that I think will be very valuable for you to at least understand, but more realistically, make money from. So our double feature of the day, we've got Zip Podcast, which is a Spotify thing, but it's still a podcast because did you know that Spotify's podcast? I know, crazy. And email. And you're like, wait a second, are these social platforms? Yes and no, and that's why I'm going to talk about it at the same time because I actually think that these two platforms are more similar than they are different. And so the big reason is all of this stuff is kind of your growth mechanisms. And I'm already doing a little foreshadowing on our growth one here. But like your email list, for example, is not going to just like sprout babies and have more emails that get made, right? If you write a banger email, you're probably not going to really grow the list. But if you have a banger piece of content on these platforms, you might absolutely grow your following, which then goes to your site, which then enter your list. And so the same happens with podcasts, right? Podcasts and email are both what I would consider long-term nurture. You're basically putting your audience into a bucket so that you can consistently add value to them. Now, here's the interesting thing with both of these. This is considered owned media, meaning you can directly email anybody who gives you their email address. Obviously, people have CRMs and things like that, so you can blast email, but you're still guaranteed to reach the email that they gave you. Spotify and Apple Podcasts and whatnot, people only listen to, this is so important. People usually only listen to 3 to 5 podcasts. And so think about your Instagram, for example. If you look at the number of people you follow, you might follow 500, you might follow 1,000, you might follow 3,000 people on your Instagram. And so all 3,000 of those accounts are competing for your scroll every time you log in. But if you get on someone's listener followership, earballs, you are only competing against 3 or 4 other people. And so as long as you continue to consistently deliver, you will basically be able to keep that person over the long haul. Now let's talk about some stats and then we'll get into the money. On the people who got money, we've got 54%. Now the stat that we found here was 75. We couldn't find the stat for 100K. That's all right. 54% of people over 75K listen to podcasts, and 96%, now this might be unsurprising, of people who make over $100,000 a year are on email. Now, let's look at America. So 92% of Americans use email. I'm like, what are the other 8%? I want to be in the 8% there. But 64% of Americans are using podcasts or audio in some format, which is actually way higher than I thought this was going to be. I thought it was still like more of a, kids, tech, whatever, but no, a lot of people listen to podcasts. I thought more people would be on radio. Let's talk about the sad news for both of these. Your ability to grow a podcast is really low. It's very, very hard to grow a podcast. Same as growing an email list. Now, to be clear, these things paired with these things, very valuable. But these things on their own, the vast majority of like big podcasters, what do you think they also have? Big ass YouTubes. So they take their podcasts, they put them on YouTube, and then they grow. Now, in the very, very, very early days, when like 6 people were having podcasts, there was growth on the platforms. But now there are so many podcasts that are out there, it's very hard. Now, podcasts relative to the amount of people who are on Instagram, I think it's like 6 million podcasts, and there's, 2 billion people on Instagram who are quote creators, whatever. And so you're still competing against a much smaller slice of creators, but the card that someone's looking at, they only got 3 to 5. And so there is fierce competition here. Now, emails, lots of people are spamming people's inboxes, and so you have to be something that people want to click on and read. So that brings us to the depth. Now, both of these are gonna be off the charts compared to everything else. So the depth on podcasts, dude, check this out. 20 minutes is the average for us in terms of listen duration for people on podcasts. I mean, it blows everything out of the water. I mean, the closest is YouTube at 8.5. Now, emails, we don't have a depth because I can't say like how long it takes someone to read, but for us, we have about 40% plus open rates on our emails. And so I see that as like, okay, they're engaged. They are at least clicking and reading the stuff that we send out, which is very sporadic because I need to work on that. That being said, let's talk about conversion. So we've got these two. We got lots of people with money, low ability to grow, really deep, which you know what that's going to mean, is that these guys are plus, they're high in terms of your conversion. I mean, email is the conversion platform of conversion platforms. So I'll give you a stat. If you're not making at least 30% of your revenue from email, you're missing out. And if you're not emailing well, and this is me talking to myself too here, you're just losing so much money because the thing is that the return on email is the highest across all platforms. All right, so the average person gets 36-to-1 return. So if you have to spend money on someone writing emails for you, these are basically free delivery. Like the only real cost is the cost of delivering the message and whatever CRM or sender you have to pay for however many emails a month you need to send, and the person who's actually writing the email if it's not you. That's it. That's the only real cost. And you can absolutely write amazing copy, make crazy offers. There's the least amount of compliance that you have to deal with. Like if you get your Facebook ad account shut down or you get your Instagram, you're not really gonna get your email taken down. Now, you could get a bad reputation with like Gmail and then they stop putting you in the main inbox, they put you in promotions. But big picture, as long as you're doing things the right way, you can have exceptional results with email in terms of converting an audience. And with podcasts, I'll say this, I put a plus here. I'll make it a plus minus. The amount of people that trust the person that they listen to podcast is through the roof. All right, so when you make a recommendation, the percentage likely that your audience that listens converts is very high. But the actual difficulty of converting on podcasts is also high because most times people have to take out their phone, type in the address, or like it disrupts the experience. Most people are listening; they don't have they're listening to their car radio because they're listening to their car, or the phone's next to them, or it's they're at the gym, and so they have to stop mid-set and be like, okay, now I'm going to type in this address and they go convert, or they have to remember to do it later, which they never will. And so that's to me a very big downside of this, but it's still, in my opinion, allows you to just get this huge amount of depth with an audience so that when you do make CTAs everywhere else, it increases the likelihood they convert. But let's talk about results. Now, for podcasts, I actually can't give results because when people type it in separately, I can't know if they came from anywhere, but I know that podcasts help us. Now, emails is absolutely tracked, and I can tell you that those numbers that we said are good. Now, here's where it gets wild. 133 seconds is the average session time of someone on email on my site. Now, here's why this is exceptionally powerful. We already have their email. So this isn't me trying to convert them. I already have their contact info. So this is when I'm making a call to action saying, hey, we just opened up a new date or 2 dates for a scaling workshop at our headquarters at acquisition.com in Vegas. If you're a business doing over $1 million a year, go there. So by the way, you can go there, acquisition.com, and just hit the scale button if you're a business owner. If you're not a business owner, don't do that. But if you're spending a minute, 2 minutes plus on there, it means that you're actually like engaging with what's on the site, deciding to book a call with our team. All right, and so this is monstrous. And for us, we're working on sending more emails because honestly, I'm so particular about written word, which is why I've been so hesitant to send emails to begin with. You'd be surprised, right? Big author is very particular about his words. Yeah, that's me. And so, like I said, for Facebook, there are some things that this video is changing about my behavior. And so definition of learning, same condition, new behavior. And so if you watch this video and then it changes what you do as a result of it, then you have learned. And so for me, taking this data, I have learned things. And so let me tell you where I'm prioritizing. All right. So where are these guys going? Where are these guys going? For me, this guy is staying in the B class. All right. I do like the depth of it. I hate the fact that it's really hard to grow, but I do think it long-term is good for brand and things like that. Email. Right here. I'm putting on the same level. This is A tier. The only reason it's not an S tier is because you can't grow. But in terms of convertibility, this is the monster of convertibility. It's LinkedIn Sales Navigator on steroids. It's the people that already trust you the most, and you can consistently continue to deliver messages to them whenever you like, as long as you continue to provide value. So I have 4 honorable mentions that I'm not going to do the full deep dive on, but I think are important. And the last one is the one that you will not expect and has made a tremendous amount of money for me that if you're good, you can crush on. So the first 3 are Pinterest, Snapchat, and Twitch. Now, right now, Twitch has been favoring super, super long streams, like all day long streams, like walking along with me, living day in the life, whatever. And people are going nuts for it. It's been tough for me because I do a lot of meetings with portfolio companies and we share stuff that I can't really talk about. And so it gets tough. It's actually why I haven't made many vlogs because it was so hard, the in and the out, and if I'm working for hours, so I haven't done it. But if you have a life or a work style that allows you to do it, I think Twitch is a huge opportunity. Now, Snapchat has done an exceptional job at commerce. And so the average revenue per viewer on Snapchat, I think, is one of the highest, if not the highest, across all platforms. And so it's really big in millennials, but it's coming back fast with like Gen Z, which is kind of interesting. And so that's one that I've kind of have my eye on. I still haven't put it on my list of where I'm going to invest resources into. I want to keep doing what we're doing better, but it's one to keep an eye on. Now, Pinterest. If you are in a business that has anything that's very visual, you should absolutely be on Pinterest. So I had an art dealer who came here, and she had 90% of her business came from Pinterest. And Pinterest has the highest average revenue per user. All right, so I think it's 120,000 plus is the average. It's wild how much people who are on Pinterest make. And so it tends to be female skewed. And so think about the arts and crafts stuff, think about wines, think about decoration, home decor, those types of businesses. If you're in one of those, smash, and highly recommend putting resources there. Because again, you're not going to be competing against a lot of people because far fewer creators are on there. All right, so what is my big secret? Number 4, drum roll please. Well, I've actually been seeding you with it this whole time. And no, the books are not a traffic source. It's actually Amazon. So if we think through the same vectors we had earlier, Amazon, what percentage of people who are over 100,000 on here? All of them. 300 million Americans are on Prime, are on paid subscriptions. Absolutely absurd. The most successful product adoption in history was Amazon Prime. Next is how many? It's the whole United States. Everybody's on Amazon. So for you to grow on Amazon, you absolutely can. And so what a lot of people don't know is that Amazon was actually one of my earliest platforms. And so when I had only 10,000 followers on Instagram and I had maybe 10,000 followers on YouTube, I don't even think I was making YouTubes yet, I published this book. And so a lot of people think that this book has the 26,000 5 stars that it has on Amazon because of the following that we have. And that's not true. This book sold more copies than I had people on my email list. All right, so talk about contacts versus customers. Now, Amazon has all of this traffic of all these people who have money. Now, are these people able to convert? Fuck yeah. They have a credit card on file and they can buy in one click. So Amazon is built for commerce. It's also why Twitch is one of the things that there's big opportunities there. Now, I'm gonna do a little caveat here. If you are an influencer or you would like to start creating content, I think that Amazon is a sleeper. And so let me walk you through some math. My book page converts at 30%. All right, so like if you had a 30% opt-in, you'd be like stoked. No. 30% of people who view my book page buy a book. And to give you a relative comparison here, Shopify, the average is around 2%. So it has a 15 times, at least for me, 15 times higher conversion for me versus Shopify because there's so much trust innate to the platform. So if you are an Instagram influencer or creator, if you promote someone else's stuff, the commissions on Amazon, I'm pretty sure, are fixed at about 10%. But if you convert 10 times more people when you send them to Amazon than you do when you send them to something that you get 20 or 30% on that only converts at 2%, you're still gonna make more money. And as an added bonus, when you promote stuff on Amazon, in my opinion, it doesn't feel nearly as asky. If you're like, hey, I was reading this really cool book, I think you like it, I've got a link here. People are like, oh, he's always selling this stuff. It's like, no, you're just providing value from products that you found. And so I think that the Amazon affiliate model is one of the most undertapped for influencers who are like, I don't know what to sell. It's like, dude, sell the stuff you like. So like, instead of trying to think of products and things like that, I think the V1 is just like, hey, these flannels are awesome. I found them on Amazon and here's the link, right? And so these aren't on Amazon, unfortunately. But point being, I think this is one of the most undertapped opportunities because here's what's cool about this traffic source. On top of all the things I just said, if you put CTAs inside of your content, inside of your books, the stuff that you sell, people can go there and then find you. And these are people that I would never have otherwise found. All right, so they found a book that had a zillion 5 stars, they bought and read the book, and then that is how they discovered me. And so my growth here that I wanna say is it's incredible and also very difficult because the only way that you can grow on Amazon is having a good product. But if you do have a good product, you can put in the QR codes, you can put CTAs if it's education-based, like media, like books. If you have physical products on Amazon, you can put the little QR codes in there. But this is another huge stream of people finding out about your stuff who otherwise wouldn't have. Now, results. These books sell almost 1,000 books a day on Amazon, which is absurd. A lot of people are really excited to get 1,000 email contacts a day. We get 1,000 customers a day from the books. And to be clear, this is not how I make my money, but these actually have become a much bigger revenue stream than I expected, given it's just, it's $30 book. And also, by the way, guys, you can get it for free on my podcast. Both of these are in audio format for free on my podcast. You can search my name. This one's a sleeper. And if you are good, it's worth putting some of your best stuff up there, even if you put it free somewhere else, because I see it as a traffic source. And the more money you make Amazon, the more they push it. If you enjoyed this video and you're trying to grow your personal brand, I have a deep dive with full slides and presentation on how branding really works today to make money. Check it out.